Everybody. Welcome back to Gray Maybe. If you are new, I'm so happy you're here. Welcome. If you are a return listener, I'm so glad you decided to tune in today, and I appreciate your support listening to all of the episodes or many of the episodes or more than one episode. Please don't forget to tell people about the episodes, especially if you like them. Please tell people. If you don't like them, maybe keep that to yourself. But I'm going to keep rolling today. I have a very special guest. This woman I met through a third party. My mentor's son, I've known for a very long time. He's a very established lighting tech person, and he helped me on one of my personal passion projects, which I'm going to link, selfless, shameless promotion, because it was so lovely. And through him, I met his lovely girlfriend, turned baby mama, turned fiance, turned soon-to-be wife, which is very exciting. Welcome to the podcast, Anita Singleton, soon-to-be maybe Shaq. Are you going to change your name? Or are you going to keep it?
So, just to match everyone, the kids.
Okay.
All
So,
of it.
yeah. So
Thank
you're
you for having me.
yes, Limited Singleton as a last name. Yes. Excellent. And so I know you through your baby daddy / fiance / soon to be hubby. But I don't know. I know you and I have talked a lot. We've talked about a lot of baby stuff because your second, my first, is very close in age. So we talk a lot about that. We keep in touch about all the mothering stuff. But I don't know a lot about your otherness.
Yeah.
If you want to promote or shout out anything or tell a little bit about yourself to the listeners, I would love that.
Yeah. I guess I'm from Northern California. I moved down to LA around 2014 for college, and then I actually moved to Denver once I graduated. Just a spontaneous move to get out, and now I'm back here in California in Orange County. And yeah, just I think the most important thing about me is like I love outdoors. I love connecting to people and finding people who have the same motivations and aspirations of me. So I think that's really important for like my mindset and stuff. And especially with you have kids, it's like you want people in your life that you more consider family now because of your kids. So
Yeah. And it can be hard to like have a village. Everybody needs a village, but it's hard to have a village. So it's important to get one, find one, curate one.
And it's
Yeah.
hard once you become a new mom because then like a lot of people who you're close with are a little harder because they don't understand or they want to make the effort. So you kind of have to back yourself away from the toxic
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah, like, relationships change based on lifestyles, and some friendships follow parallel paths and some kind of like branch out into
Yeah.
other paths. And it can be really hard if you're, you know, going down the path of motherhood and your close friends are not or haven't already done that or aren't going to do that. It's sometimes a mismatch for a little while or forever. Sometimes those
Yeah.
relationships change. Yeah.
I know. And I've learned to like not talk to not that I don't talk to my friends, but just keep it short and sweet because they can input as much and advice as they want, but they're never going to understand because they're not a mom.
Right.
So, a
Yeah.
little bit there.
Yeah. That's like, I find that true a lot for any life-changing experience or any experience. Like
Yeah.
people, I try really hard not to give advice. I say I'll give suggestion, but I don't give advice. But I
Yeah.
try not to give advice, especially in things that I don't have any experience in,
Mhm.
like, because I feel like anybody who's listening, if I haven't had that experience, I'm like, why would they listen
Hard to
to me?
give your
Like,
10 cents. Yeah.
right? I'm like, oh, I know what to do. Like, yeah, of course you do. You're not in the situation. Like,
Yeah, exactly. You're like giving the positive
yeah,
motivation. And honestly,
yeah,
like for me, I give the hard truth, which is really hard. So it takes
yeah.
time to accept it because a lot of times people don't like what I have to say.
Right. You're going to give the
Or,
real deal. You're not going to sugarcoat it.
no, I don't sugarcoat it.
No.
We don't have any
Yeah.
time for that. No one has
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. A
So,
friend of mine recently, I have known her struggles with getting her children to eat certain things, healthy
mhm.
things. And I'm very lucky at this point with mine that she will kind of eat whatever I give her. And I told her, I was like, don't get jealous, but she's walking up to me and eating whatever I'm giving her. And she's like, I won't unless you try to tell me what I should try to
What to
do
eat. Yeah.
to get my kids to eat. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
never, never.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Yes. Okay. So this season, I did put out a little thing on Instagram, kind of searching for people who were ready and willing to talk about the topic of abuse, of their own personal experience with it. And you were one of the people that hit me up and
Yeah.
was like, hey, I'm down to talk. And I was so pleased because you and I have had many texts and in-person conversations about many things, some things very serious things,
Mhm.
and some like very surface mom stuff. And
Yeah.
so I was excited to hear about your trauma, which is a weird thing to say and a weird thing to be excited about. But I was like, oh, yes, this is a woman that I have had many conversations with. I was excited
Yeah.
that you felt comfortable in sharing your story. And so, with that, would you tell me and our listeners a little bit about your experience, what you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, definitely. So, growing up, my parents were very strict. My dad never gave me freedom. I wasn't really like, look at all my texts, look at all my emails, track me where I was. If I hung out with a friend, meet their parents, what do they do? What aspirations does my friend have? Are they good people? Do they smoke? Do they drink? So I was very watched on the clock 24/7. So once I kind of graduated, kind of became like a rebel, got
Mm-hmm.
tattoos, drank a lot. And I met my first boyfriend, so the first like love of my life, which was like the hardest. But I met him through work. He was actually a manager at somewhere I worked, and he was just kind of a bad boy, and I loved it because my parents were so on me that I was like, tend to say F it and just like date
Mm-hmm.
someone who's fun and just like wild. So we started dating. Just a bunch of red flags that if I saw my friend do that or my daughter do that, it's so serious. But for me, because he was like the first guy I fell in love with, it was even harder because you kind of just keep telling yourself, like, well, he loves me. Or, if he abused me
Right.
or he hit me or threw something at me, the next day he'd bring me flowers or write me a love note or just do something cute.
Mm-hmm.
And that was me being, and then I would end up saying sorry because I'm like, no, you don't have to do all this. Like, it was a mistake. I know it happened. I'm sorry. But there was just times where I'd catch him cheating with my best friend or something like this, and it was always brought back to, well, you did this, so I had to go do that. And then you feel the guilt. And I actually watched It Ends With Us, a movie, really good,
Mm-hmm.
but it kind of points out like it makes me feel more at peace, not peace, but like it was my closure because I think a lot of these things happened and to this day I never saw it. But seeing on a big screen, seeing how someone else becomes the victim and apologizing, it made me feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. Like this actually happens and
Yeah.
very toxic and manipulative. And you just do it because you're in love and you're like, he's going to change for me, or he makes you feel so special that he's willing to change for you and nothing happens.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's like so important about seeing media where things are represented. You telling your story. It when other people relate, they feel seen and they feel
Yeah.
heard in their experience, right? They feel validated. I always reference it as you earn your seat at the table, right? Because I'm the first to always say like, oh, I don't qualify, right? That's my biggest
Mhm.
thing. It's been my biggest problem with everything that I've eventually gotten a bit of recovery in is like I find ways to discredit why it doesn't apply to me in the
Yeah.
sense of like, oh, well, I wasn't in an abusive relationship because I didn't have bruises all over my face,
Yeah.
or like I didn't have an eating disorder because I didn't go into the hospital for it and I
Yeah.
didn't weigh, so sickly. Still qualified, but in my own head, I find ways not to qualify, right? And so, especially with different types of abuse, especially in intimate partner abuse, there's so many layers to what does actually constitute abuse. But I
Yeah.
think because I think it's getting better, but I think in media it's so portrayed in one way a lot of times that the manipulation and the brainwashing and the control and the things like that, not even control like you can't go anywhere, but like the
Yeah.
mind control of things to like start to slowly shift your reality, the gaslighting
Yeah.
of this is how to turn this around to that it is always your fault no matter what I do as the abuser. It is your fault. You made me do it. It's
Yeah.
because of these things. And it's not always in those words, but that's how it comes back around. And I
Definitely.
think like you said something really notable. You said I saw these red flags, but then, all these nice things would happen. And I think that gets forgotten a lot of times. I think
Mhm.
people think from the outside, it's like, oh, well, all these red flags, but you forget that part of the cycle of abuse is what's called the honeymoon period, which is those
Yeah.
apologies and those grandiose gestures, right?
Mhm.
all of the words that they couldn't seem to find in the moment. Now they have all these words. And I've noticed too, in a lot of people more currently, the weaponization of therapy speak.
Yeah.
Right? Of like the use of like therapy terms to either like win arguments, manipulate, or find their way back.
Hmm.
Right? Like, I just really need to work on myself and know my weakness, like that kind of
Yeah.
shit. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Right.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
that
For
kind
sure.
of shit. And then I just want to say one other thing before I keep interrupting you.
Good.
You talked about having a really controlling father or
Hmm.
parental situation. I also had that, like, and I
Yeah.
just in you talking about that, I just like had a light bulb moment of like, oh yes, my mom was super controlling when I was growing up. I've always been very open about that. But that kind of primed me for being rebellious. Obviously, I knew that I was rebelling because I didn't have any freedom,
Yeah.
but also it kind of primes you for a controlling relationship, right? Because that's kind of what you're used to. And then
For what?
also, like, yeah, my dad was very verbally abusive. I found a partner that was very verbally abusive. That was my first,
Yeah.
kind of
And it just
intimate
makes sense.
relationship.
You're like, I
Yeah,
grew up with this, seeing it
yeah.
every day, so why am I any different?
Why would it be different?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense, right? Okay, cool.
So
I
yeah.
just thank you for saying that because I was like, oh man, that just like resonated with me on a really deep level.
Yeah.
So you said there were these red flags, like the
Hmm.
physical violence, the cheating, and then the manipulation, and the gaslighting, kind of about it being your fault. You did so when these things are happening, like you didn't consider it abuse because of the
Because I just think like I'm trying everything to give this man that I love, just everything. I'm like, I want to be the perfect girlfriend. I want to be, and there's times where he was like, let's have a threesome. Like it would make me happy. And you want to do it because you love your partner. So you're like, I'll do anything to make you happy. But it's like, why should a woman do something that she's not comfortable for a man that she loves? Because if the man loves you, he's going to respect your wishes. But in my
yeah.
mind, he loves me. He wants me, but he wants another woman to make him happy too. So that
Hmm.
was kind of made me think that was normal.
Right. You're like working mental gymnastics to make it make sense, for you totally.
Literally the
Like,
equation and everything.
yeah, you're like, okay, this I can make this
Yeah.
make sense. No, totally. Yeah, that's a big one I find in like abusive stuff. Like I've been hearing a little bit. I was talking to a friend a couple weeks ago, and she was confiding into me about some stuff that I would consider sexual coercion,
Yeah.
which is what you're talking about. It's like, a partner that wants something that you don't want,
Hmm.
and they're going to like kind of coerce you through either like manipulation, guilt, um the what's it called, like where you just like sheerly like you say it so many times you just bother someone, like you're like
Yeah.
relentless, that you just kind of like break someone down until they're just finally like fine,
Yeah.
fuck it, fine, like wearing someone down, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's all, I would say, under the guise of like sexual coercion. Like this is not something that the other person wants. Like you said, if they really loved you and respected you, they wouldn't want to put you in a position of anything that you're not interested in.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to matter to some of these people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did this like, did you have like a moment of like what I would call a rock bottom where you're like, this is the last time, or this
I
is like it?
wish I did. I
Hmm.
really wish I did. I wish I was that strong to just like walk away.
I don't know if
Um,
it's that strong. A rock bottom. Have you seen someone in their rock bottoms? They do
I
not
know,
feel
sometimes.
strong.
I wish there's so many times where, you say it's your last time or you're done, and then like you go back and then it's like, fuck, if I would have just left,
Hmm.
none of this would happen. But he was an alcoholic. That was another thing. He would drink probably at least a bottle a day of vodka. And
Wow.
to me, it was like, okay, well, he's very stressed with work. He was in a halfway house for a couple of months. And so I was like, he's just going through a lot. I've never been in that situation. So whatever he has to do to cope with it, by all means, it's not my business. Um, but yeah, and then he started taking meth, and I didn't know, or doing meth. I had no idea, but I think there was flags that I also didn't see once we broke up, and I looked back at pictures, or I looked back at things he would do. Like he would just be up all night, and I was like, okay, maybe he's doing some cocaine, or he's just, that's why he's up. but it was always like someone's here, someone's at the door, and it was the paranoid, and it was all the yellow gunk in his eyes and breaking out a lot, and I just never saw these signs ever, and it's just like how stupid I felt just for not noticing my boyfriend doing meth. And I actually came home from college one day and all the stuff was gone. And that's kind of how it ended. And then
All the stuff was gone, like
all his stuff.
all of his. He just
He was-
pieced out.
he just pieced out.
Oh wow.
And then I found out 3 weeks later he took a train to San Francisco, just literally was homeless and just started working and found an aunt that lived there that he never met and started moving in. And now he has his life together. So I'm really happy for him. But
Wait,
it broke
wait,
me.
wait. That whole monologue you just gave, at no point did I know what was coming next in the story. Like every time you
No.
said something, it went somewhere else that I did not expect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that explains like when someone's on meth, their mind
Yeah.
is just not
Yeah.
there.
It's all over the place. It's 100
Oh,
miles a minute and it's all over the place.
yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, I think if you don't grow up in drug addiction,
Mhm.
like illicit drug addiction, I don't think you do recognize those things. You know what I'm saying? Like, I grew up with alcoholism and I still like there's quite a bit of denial because even around alcoholism or drug addiction, like there's a lot of denial present.
Yeah.
Like that's just part of the, family disease of these things, right? So definitely give yourself some grace because, girl, like I one time worked for someone who had some addictions and meth was one of them. And I did not understand. I didn't know. I
Yeah.
couldn't figure it out. And now, of course, I would probably clock that and I'd
Sure.
be like, that's meth, but at the time I had no idea. And I was like,
Clueless.
why is this person so crazy? Why are
Yeah.
they so set off? Why are they, sweating at 7 a.m.? Like why, why
Is
are
it
their
like
eyes like, like this big,
okay,
and like,
the
yeah,
people?
so
So
cut yourself some slack. So the way it happened for you was you came home and you were he
we just
like abandoned you. Yeah. Which is
Mhm.
also another abuser trait to like abandon.
Just
And
leave. Yeah.
sometimes just peace out. And a lot of times like my abuser would abandon me and then come back within an amount of time that I would be, instead of angry, I'd just be so relieved.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
other abusers I've heard have done that too, like whether it's a weekend or 2 hours or an hour, like they know the perfect amount of time to get you
And then
past where
just
you're
like
just
snap you back in, and they're like,
yes,
"Not you again."
yes,
Yeah. So he
yes.
reached out to me like a month later and kind of dragged me on for a year of just like, what are we doing? And he lived in San Francisco and he had court meetings that I would still go to. He ended up going back to jail. And to that time period, I was the only one there for him. I mean, I feel stupid that I even did that.
Mhm.
Because then right after he got out of jail, he ended up getting married and had 2 kids.
So yeah,
I
you
just
got
felt
us.
stupid that
Yeah,
entire years. I'm
y-
like, you have a whole wife now. So
yeah.
it was crazy.
You were like my devotion got me nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And just
uh,
trying to be a good person, was
right,
what I was trying to do.
right.
But I think even for me, my reason I told myself that the reason he left was 2 months prior to him leaving, I got pregnant and he obviously got abortion. But he kept saying, if you get an abortion, we're going to get married. I have a whole life planned for us.
Mm,
So to kind of trip someone, and I mean, of course, like I
yeah,
thank God I didn't have that baby at 19,
yeah.
but to kind of trip someone because it's a woman's right, a woman's body,
Mm-hmm.
and to just promise them like a marriage and a life if they get rid of the baby, and then you get rid of the baby 2 months later and then you leave. So it's just kind of hard. So I kept telling myself like the reason he left was because whole abortion was hard. I was 11 weeks. I was the last week before it was even legal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was hard. It was like one of the hardest things to go through.
Yeah, yeah. And that in itself, like a lot of I've had 2 abortions, and my first one, the place I went to was so intense about making sure that you weren't being coerced.
Yeah.
Like they had you sign things, they talked to you numerous times, you had to talk to a couple nurses. Like
Mhm.
I just remember it being like a big deal, and I wasn't being coerced. I wasn't happy that I was in that situation. I was like, I didn't want to have an abortion, but I didn't want to have a kid. Like, it's like no one's like running around being like, oh,
Yeah.
can't wait to have an abortion. I just have been fiending for it, or like oh, well, I just got pregnant. I'll just get an abortion. Like, no one's doing that. Anyone
Yeah.
who's saying that is so out of touch with reality and
Yeah.
women and how women deal with it is like insane. Even if someone says something flippantly about it, there's no way going through that procedure is a comfortable experience, no matter
No.
what way you take. If you're taking a pill form, if you're getting a surgery form, it's not fucking comfortable. No
Yeah.
one is doing it flippantly, no matter how they might present.
And I kind
But,
of got mad after it. Like I was
oh,
pretty
yeah.
mad. I'm like, you put me through this. Like I
Yeah.
know it takes two to tango, but
Yeah.
there's four doctors around your vagina and they're
Yeah.
just like, you feel a suction and it's just
Yeah.
like, the
Yeah.
worst. I would never. It's just hard.
Absolutely. I agree. I had a lot of rage after my first one because that relationship was not. I talk a little bit about it. Like I would say it was abusive light. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like it was on its way. Like
Yeah.
it was tumultuous. Would it have ever materialized into like a Dateline episode? Probably not. The first one I had definitely probably would have materialized into that. But it had those hallmarks, and I did have a lot of resentment afterwards due to some of the conversations that had happened around it, how he dealt with it, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, the abandoning you out of nowhere, the stringing you along with false promises, the getting you to do something he wants with a false promise of an outcome that was never going to happen or he had no intention of
Yeah.
promise keeping is also really difficult
Yeah.
and heavy and hard,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think it was hard because, you go to work and I had bruises on like my eyes or my nose, and people are like, obviously cover up with makeup, but I was a server, so I'm sweating during the night, and it would just kind of show. And people, my manager like brought me into his office, and he's like, I know what's going on. Like, you have to either one of you has to quit because this isn't healthy. You guys both work here, and it's not a good look, and it's not good for you. And I was just like,
Hmm.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, it was an
Right.
accident. So I think
And
it's
did you when this manager was talking to you, did you feel like, oh my God, I'm being like caught, or like did you
I
feel
kind of
shame, or you were
got
like,
like angry because I was protecting my
right,
boyfriend, and I was like, how dare you like tell me that he's an abuser, like he loves me.
right?
So, which is just like so silly, like,
But that's what happens. This
yeah,
is
it's
very
so sad.
textbook,
Yeah,
This is very normal actually in these types of relationships is like
yeah,
if you've ever had a friend that's been in an unhealthy relationship, let's not even say like it's abusive, let's just say it's unhealthy, and you like are the one that's like, this guy doesn't treat you right or this girl doesn't treat you
and they
right.
did
And then they
exactly.
get mad. They're like, how dare and then or if they like break up and you're like, yeah, I never liked him anyways, and they get back together and
Yeah,
then they know that you don't like
and
them,
then
and then
they're
it's like a
ashamed and all this stuff. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah. No, that's totally normal is to protect. I protected my first abuser like so hardcore with my family. Like
Yeah,
my mom did not like him. My parents did not want him around, and I would just like protect him so hardcore, and like and with friends too. Like I had a
yeah,
friend in high school that was like trying to tell me that he was cheating on me. She saw him at a party doing this, and this. And I was just
hmm,
like, you didn't see what you saw. Like, I did
yeah,
not want to believe her. And
yeah,
he was lying so prolifically. And I was going to believe him because that was easier than trusting her and knowing
yeah.
that he was doing all
It's
those
easier
things.
to just like kind of look the other way than to be like, oh, he was actually doing that. Yeah,
Yeah, because I wasn't ready to leave.
yeah,
So if I found out all that stuff, like it would require me to have to do something, and so
yeah.
I was not ready to do
And
any of
it's
that.
hard, I think, when you're in love to like fall out of, even though there's so much red flags and toxic energy, it's still hard to unlove that person.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's hard enough to like deal with a breakup if you love someone and there isn't all the extra stuff, right? Like it's hard enough just to do a breakup and you're like, I love that person. And it's really hard if you're in a, like uh codependent,
Yeah.
abusive relationship. It makes it even more difficult.
So
Yeah,
hard. That's just
I
like all the
agree.
things you guys went through. It's like, it's a lot and it's
Right.
sad. So,
Right. And I've mentioned, I think in a different episode,
mhm.
I've mentioned in a different episode that uh, sometimes if you were raised in a chaotic household or, something like that, that being in a dramatic love relationship actually appeals to you. Like I did. I
Yeah.
didn't want something that wasn't dramatic because I was like, well, that's not real love, or that's
Yeah,
not like it
exactly. And
wasn't
that's all the
exciting enough.
all the fights, it's like because you love each other, you fight a
It's so
lot. And it's like,
passionate. It's so
no,
passionate. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, he does that because he loves me. And it's like, no, like in relation, and that's I think coming into, my relationship with my boyfriend right now, it definitely was hard because I was like, this isn't normal. It's not normal to just like not fight or not be happy or
Right.
have all
Right.
these things or just all the other toxic energies of like with my ex, I would find like messages and it was like he would rename in his phone like his family members and it would be a girl. And so I think the trust issues of your relationship now, it's like how do you fully trust someone after
Yeah.
all of your partners have cheated or have done something to you?
Yeah. I've mentioned in a couple other episodes that um, the abandonment stuff really has stuck with me. Like I'll just repeat for anybody who's listening to this episode for the first time, and for you, like the original abuser I had when I was 16.
Hmm.
One of the things he would do is we would be like going to the mall, and he would be driving. We'd go to the mall, and then he'd be like, "I'm going to run upstairs to get something. I'll meet you back here in 10 minutes," and then he would leave. He would just leave for hours. And I would, and this is in the 90s, so I didn't have a cell phone. There was
Yeah,
no Uber. I didn't have like, a
you're
credit
just like,
card.
oh,
I didn't like, no, I'm like, how am I going to get home? How am I
yeah.
going to tell my mom how I got home? I can't call her. She's going to be like, why are you abandoned at a mall? And then she's
Yeah.
going to make me break up with it. Like it was,
Then it just
he,
adds more of like it's hard to just the more you add in, the more fuel it gets, and it's just harder to unravel versus like you turn the other way and just you have to sit there and wait.
yeah,
Like wait.
exactly. And I would go through like denial. Oh, he's not doing this to me right now. Like he's just taking longer than he is, to like anger. Why is he doing this? To then like, wait, is he okay? Did something
And then
happen?
you're worried about them.
Yes, right. You're like, oh no. And then by the time he showed up, I was just so relieved that I
And
didn't have to figure it out,
yeah,
and that I was okay. Like he became my savior in a problem he
exactly.
created.
And that's like the thing that gets me the most is they're your savior. Like you
Yeah.
think, thank God you're here. And when it's
Yeah.
really like, what the fuck? Like they put you in a
Demented.
position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's hard.
And that's one of the things that's really stuck with me. Like I'll think, I don't like think about it every day, but like
Mhm.
if someone is really late and I can't get a hold of them,
You start
I'm
to get
like,
that
they
trauma.
left. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like, they left. They're pieced out. Like that's it. So like so he pulled the abandonment thing. He strung you along for God knows how long with the court stuff in his messy
Yeah.
life, and then when he finally got his shit together, he pieced he pieced out with someone else. Classic abuser stuff.
Classic. Classic.
Now,
Yeah.
how did you kind of process and heal from this stuff? Like,
A lot of therapy.
excellent. I'm a big
I'm
proponent of
still in
therapy.
therapy right now. Me and my partner go to therapy. We do it together and then we do it alone. 'Cause it's not easy. I think going from having your parents being like they were and then going through relationships is just like you're never gonna, it's not easy just to be normal
Right.
or the same. So therapy definitely helps. I think the first year after the breakup was the hardest because I didn't even want the baby, but I think seeing pregnant people, I was just sad because I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that was me.
Mm-hmm.
And just, it was just really hard, a really hard year. I was just sad. And a lot of my friends were like, he was literally trash. Like, you should be so happy. And it's like, but that was my first in love
Yeah.
moment. It's my
Yeah.
first relationship. You give it everything you have.
Yeah. And I think that's something too that people don't understand about. Um, this is like a parallel topic, and I've talked about it a little bit in the first season. I feel like about terminations and abortions is like there is a grieving of something that you weren't ready for, like you wanted but weren't ready for,
Yeah.
and that's a special type of sadness, and it's complicated, right? Because you're like, oh, thank God not with him.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the wrong time. But like there's still a grieving for that pregnancy, for
Yeah.
that situation, because you may want it in the future. It's complicated,
Yeah.
and only people who have gone through it kind of get it.
And you know it.
And you see other people having the situation where their life is right in that moment, and you're envious or sad or triggered, and seeing the things like I definitely experienced that for a long time after my first abortion. My second abortion, I had a completely different experience. I was totally like relief immediately and like moving on. Like it's just different
Yeah.
situations, different
Yeah.
places. Um, which was weird to me because I really thought I was going to be in that position again the same way I went through the first one. But I relate to that for
Yeah.
sure.
Because it's like you don't want it. I'm so happy I got it, and especially in the moment I was, but it was still sad, that was still something that happened to your body. Your body went through it, your hormones went through it.
Hmm.
And you bleed after, you get
Yeah,
hormones, like it's all still symptoms that you go. So it was hard, but thankful
yeah,
now. And I think once I got pregnant with my son, we were in a relationship. And that's kind of when I got the mentality of like, I'm going to have this kid, whether you're a part of it or not. At
right.
first, I was like, I don't even want to tell him, I don't need a man. I can do this myself. I'm a woman.
Hmm.
So that was my motivation of like, I'm going to have this baby because I feel like I'm ready. I feel like I've done everything I wanted. I've lived a really good life.
Hmm.
So that was kind of my thing. And I was like, not against abortion, but I don't want to go through that again. And I can do this myself. I don't need, it's not like I had that relationship and was like, oh, is this the one I'm going to be with? It was like, no, I'm going to do this for me.
I love that because in the first one, your whole decision hinged on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
abuser, right? And this time you were like, no, no, I've got this.
Yeah.
Stay or don't, but like I've got this. Like this is going to be my
Yeah.
situation. I love that. That's so much
Yeah.
like, you know, a choice to do something different, to not follow the same pattern, to not, not saying that that would be the outcome again, but you know what I'm saying? Like so much of dealing with a propensity for abuse. And when I say a propensity for abuse, I feel like it's like some of us are highly empathetic, so we attract narcissistic people who are often
Yeah.
abusers. And then also, like maybe the way we grow up also kind of predisposes us. If we have low self esteem, predisposition.
Yeah.
Sometimes the faith that we grow up in also predisposition to some of this stuff. And so to fix or change the pattern is a big deal.
Yeah.
Any like change of the pattern, because it's easy to get into that pattern of dating abusers over and over and over again. They
Yeah.
look in it, they're in a different package, but they're the same inside. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, this one's not an abuser, but then you're like, oh yeah, no, that's abuser, different
Yeah.
way. But oh, this one's not oh yeah, no, no, this was
Different
abuser,
ways.
different way. So it's
Exactly.
like anytime you step out of those patterns and you like have that growth, I think it's important.
Definitely.
So you've done a lot of therapy with your partner and alone, which I think is great. I just want to give a shout out to therapy and couples therapy. You don't have to be in uh, what's the word I want to say, in crisis to go to couples therapy.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can just
And
go
that's
to
the
like,
hardest thing I think reality and like social media has made is like if you go to therapy, you have problems. No, like you go to therapy to just grow. Like it is so healthy to go to therapy. If we have a session where it's like nothing's going on, so we just talk, and it's like you do that to grow as two different people, not because something's wrong in your relationship.
I love that. And I like to say that therapy is the ultimate self-care, but it's not the like hot bubble bath self-care. It's not like the in the moment it
No,
feels really
yeah,
good. It's like in the moment it usually it feels very terrible. Like I
yeah,
hate therapy. I actually don't enjoy it, but I do it because it's good for me and
yeah.
I do feel better after the
After
fact
it,
and
yeah.
yeah. But I think it's like the ultimate form of self-care and the ultimate form of like luxury is
Yeah.
like having a therapist. So I like try to
And
promote
it's
that.
hard. Like I think also just for everyone who's like listening and viewing is, if you try one therapist and you don't like it, doesn't mean that there is not a right one out there. I
Thank
went
you
through
for saying
so
that.
many therapists that I'm like, I don't like you, I don't connect with you, until I found one that I was like, holy shit, like you're my girl. I can tell you anything. So
That is so
don't
important.
give up on one
I'm
matter.
so glad you said that because I also say that a lot because a lot of times people be like, yeah, I tried therapy, it didn't work for me,
It
or
wasn't for
I
me.
couldn't find, yeah, and you're like, no, therapy's for everyone. You just have to find that. It's like, can you
Yeah.
imagine being like,
Dating.
I went
Yeah.
to the doctor, it wasn't for me. It's like,
Yeah.
right. Maybe you didn't go to the right doctor. Maybe you should find a different practitioner.
Literally.
Not everyone's good at their jobs. Like just because someone's a therapist doesn't mean they're a good therapist, and also
Yeah.
doesn't mean they're the right
Not
therapist for
everyone's the
you.
same. And also
Yeah.
like what they do, what their experience is, and
Yeah.
how they go about it. I actually see a life coach. It's a little bit different than therapy.
Hmm.
So I love my life coach, not to kind of tell me what to do or what I'm doing wrong, but
Hmm.
necessarily be there by my side and give me different routes to take because of all the trauma I have.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways that you can help yourself out of
Yeah.
some of these situations. I'm like therapy, therapy, therapy. I am
Yeah.
like 12-step programs. Coda is amazing, like especially for abusive relationships. Al-Anon stuff if you've grown up in alcoholic or drug or mentally ill households. Group therapy stuff is always really great. Life coaches, if you find a life coach you really like, or what you see one that your friend has that is
Yeah.
working out for them, that kind of stuff through recommendations. Books, there's lots of really great books. Like
Mhm.
Gabor Mate is a really good author of stuff, and The Body Holds the Score, or Keeps the Score, Holds the Score, Keeps the Score, one of those. I'll link them. I'm making a note. Yes, so those all, like all that kind of stuff. Like, was there anything else that you thought that really kind of helped you, or something that didn't help at all? Like, oh, this I tried this. Like for me, group therapy did not work,
Yeah.
but 12-step meetings work.
Yeah. I think like definitely after my abusive relationship, unfortunately, alcohol made it easier. So I ended up drinking a lot and unfortunately got a DUI, which thankful and not thankful for it. It made me a better person. I actually did go to AA meetings because court assigned me to.
Mm-hmm.
And I hated it at first, but then once
Mm-hmm.
you like actually see the same people every week, they have coffee, they have muffins, they have pastries. It is so wholesome and
Mm-hmm.
welcoming. I mean, I remember there was a guy and he was like, I'm homeless. It's my third day being clear of like heroin. And I was like, holy shit, like you think you're going through the worst and then you see someone else and they
Mm-hmm.
still show up. So it's like being around people who are going through harder stuff and
Mm-hmm.
also still showing up for themselves, even if it's they messed up and now they're just one day sober. It's like they still showed up for themselves, which is so inspiring.
Thank you for saying that, because that's exactly a lot of 12-step meetings is you're sharing or not sharing, but you're hearing people's shares. There's no advice giving, you're just listening. And you hear people who are having so much more of a rough day than you.
Yeah.
And in the moment, you're kind of like, all right, at least I'm not dealing with that. And sometimes in the room, you're the one having the rough day, but
Yeah.
everyone's just like listening, and that they're not, it feels like they're not judging you because they know what's up, and like they're all there for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also, alcohol was my favorite drug of choice for many, many years.
Yeah.
It helped me deal with my anxiety. It helped me take the edge off. It's the thing that I want to run back to always.
It's so easy. It was so
Yeah,
easy just to
yeah,
like have a drink and like feel more relaxed, not
yeah,
have anxiety, that pressure.
yeah.
I think that's like growing up to the trauma of me is like having one of my parents say like I'm not good enough or do better.
Hmm.
And when you have alcohol, it's like you have that confidence, you have that boost. And
Yeah.
I remember taking a final and I'd be like, I need a drink first. And it's like, it is 8 a.m., like you don't need a drink right now. Like, yeah, it's important, I think, to surround yourself with friends who also uplift you. Like you don't have to turn to alcohol. Just create that space, that safe space for you and that motivating space
Yeah.
and just work on yourself. And I think for another thing for me was like exercising. I'm huge on going to the gym every day. And it's
Hmm.
like if I don't go to the gym, I feel like a shit person. I feel like I'm not a good mom. I just don't feel like my headspace is right. So for me, exercising was one of my positive traits that
Hmm.
happened after alcohol and after all the abuse.
Hmm. So that was kind of
Yeah.
like your own personal, like, self-care. I
Yeah.
mean, in addition to all the therapy and stuff, it's like this is my self-care. Like if I don't do this, I don't feel
Yeah.
like I'm taking care of myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
I
love that.
grew up kind of like always wanting to be bone skinny. So
Mm.
when someone was like, drink a protein shake, I'm like, do you know how many calories are in that? Like, that's my whole day. Like, no. And now I've learned to like love carbs and love protein and be okay with eating a meal every 3, 4 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I have definitely talked a
Yeah.
little bit about that shared experience
Yeah.
of thin obsession. I mean, I definitely have thin obsession. Not so much anymore. Well, it still creeps in, but like I know that I was groomed by media to
Yeah.
be thin obsessed. And I also feel like I feel like it's not as feminist to strive for the thinness because
Yeah.
of what that represents and who that's for. But nonetheless, it still creeps in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I easily can get kind of fixated on that kind of stuff. And
And it's hard. And you kind of like, I feel like now I catch myself too, because, or
yeah,
at least my partner does. He's like, stop saying that. Like, you're on your kids. Like, stop calling yourself fat.
yeah,
Stop saying, like, I look too big. It's like your kids are listening and like,
yeah, yeah,
and they're going to grow up with that body dysmorphia. And it's like, that's,
yeah,
I never want my kids to ever feel like they're not good enough or to look at
right.
themselves and see not as much. So,
Yeah, I want to be strict with myself about that as well because I have a tendency to make my own comments about that kind of stuff. And
yeah. And you don't
I
notice
don't
it.
want,
It's totally
yeah,
normal. You're just like,
yeah.
whatever, like, I look fat.
Right. And it's like, it's so overwhelming, like I have to say it, but it's like, yeah. I heard in a meeting once, someone was like, you can't, like, because I would say, like, I would say that, like, I feel fat. And I
Yeah.
heard someone in a meeting, in an OA meeting, Overeaters Anonymous, say one time, like, you can't feel brown eyes. You can't feel
Yeah.
blue eyes. Like if you
Yeah.
say I feel fat, it's like that's not actually a feeling. The
Yeah.
feeling is I feel anxious about A, B, and C, or I feel, not confident because of this, that, or the other, or I feel depressed because of this, or I saw, like, but you can't actually feel fat. Just
No.
like you can't feel blonde hair or white skin or black
Yeah.
skin or brown skin or, I
That's a
thought that
good
was
one.
it, right. I was like,
That's
oh
good.
yeah, okay,
You
to get
can't.
under there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Um, I also think, like, I don't know if this was with you or not, since we have this shared experience of body dysmorphic eating disorder stuff or disordered eating. Did it ever pop up in your relationship? Like, I remember self punishing, like, when things were really stressful in my abusive relationship, I would self punish by trying to, like, getting thinner or not eating. It would, like, part of the anxiety of the relationship, like how I felt about the relationship, was also how I would treat myself with food. Did you find yourself doing any of that?
I honestly felt that mainly because he was also very strict on how I looked. If I wanted to have sex, he would be like, "Well, did you go on a run today? Or did you do squats today?" And so I would, and if I didn't, I would go downstairs and go to the gym.
Oh, wow. So he was like, there was a precursor to your
Yeah.
desirability based on if you had worked for it or not.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I worked at Hooters, so you have to look the part. So appearance was very important for
Right.
my job. So he was like, "Well, if you want to work more shifts or if you want to have me as a partner, like you need to look the way it should."
Yeah.
So a lot of that, which in my like mind back then, I was like, well, he's doing that because he loves me. He wants me to look
To
good
be
for me.
healthy. Yeah.
He wants me to look hot, like the hottest Hooter girl. And yeah,
Yeah.
so, and it's good. I'm happy I took that into now doing exercise as a positive thing versus being like, oh, I look fat, I'm going to go run. It's like, no, you
Hmm.
should do something because you love it, not because you feel like you have to.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I'm someone who doesn't like to exercise, actually. I actually find myself to be a very lazy person. I happen to like have jobs that just it's part of the job
Good
to
job.
exercise, which is the only way I could do this, really. Like, because
Um,
I'm just not a self motivated person, unfortunately. To go to a gym or do a hike or like all of that stuff is like very hard for me to self motivate.
yeah.
Um, Oddly. So, but yes, I always feel better, obviously, after I've moved around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So do you have any idea? Like, I've been asking some people this season
Hmm.
about this. Like, why do you think there is so much stigma or shame surrounding like abuse? Because like as you're going through it, it's not like you're telling people. You're
Yeah.
kind of trying to keep it
Keeping it
and
in.
protect them. Yeah. Like, why do
Yeah.
you think that is? Do you have any
I
ideas?
think I just feel like if I put myself back in that position, you're just so scared and you don't. It's kind of like the same thing if you get raped. You're not going to go and be like, I was just raped. And if you do, so awesome. Do it. But a lot of the times I've been raped, and at that time, you don't tell anyone because you're so embarrassed. You're like, and you kind of put that shame on yourself as well. I brought myself here. That guy took advantage of me because I showed up. So I think the same thing with an abusive relationship, you kind of feel the guilt of like, okay, well, this is my fault. It's happening. If it's another woman, it wouldn't happen. It's because I'm not doing something right for him, and that's why I have to be punished.
Mm-hmm.
So I
And
think
I'm
it's
Yeah, and I'm wondering if it's like societally something that's really extra amplified on women, like that
Yeah.
kind of responsibility, right? Like it's your fault that you've enticed these men to do these things that they can't control. Like, so it's like the default is for us to like assume responsibility.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's so
And I
weird.
move away. And to me, I mean, it's the same thing. I think when you have kids, there's some older people here that are like, oh, it's supposed to be a woman's job, like the man is supposed to be the working and the woman's supposed to sit at home and be the perfect housewife. It's like,
Hmm.
no, absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, no.
Fuck that.
Yeah, not without some benzos, everybody, because that's how all of them were surviving back in the day.
It's like an entire different world now. And
Yeah.
I'm really happy now. It's like men are, being more involved with their partners and their kids. But same with abusive relationships. It's like, I'm happy it's being more spoken about because it was never.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anything in your experience like that surprised you about processing the abuse or like in your recovery? Was there anything that you can think of that you just were surprised about? Like as I've healed from my abusive relationships, plural or situations,
Yeah.
times that I've experienced abuse, it's always surprised me how long it's taken me to process that that's what happened
Yeah.
and like name it. And then like and it still happens. Like I still will look back on things and be like, oh yeah, that was, assault, or oh, that was, so that's surprising to me, is that it's me being someone who's, I feel, pretty not in denial anymore in my life and pretty outspoken and pretty like whatever. It still is happening for me. So that was always
Yeah.
surprising to me. Is there anything?
I think the same, probably looking at a situation and being like, oh, you were actually doing that, or looking back at memories and pictures and be like, you actually acted like that because like you were doing the drugs or you're messaging the girls. It's because you didn't actually love me or care about me. You actually had nothing for me. So it's
Mhm.
kind of just surprising me. And I think if I had to face him one to one now, I would just ask him like, why? Like, why would you put me through all of that if you didn't care about me?
Mhm.
And it makes me wonder, like, I don't understand why you have to put someone through all that pain and all that hurt because they truly love you and you see that they're opening up for you and you just kind of disappoint them. And I think after that, finding love after relationships, my wall has been up so much because I don't want to get hurt again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in our first relationships, they kind of like give us an outline for the rest of our
Yeah. What you're like set up
situation.
for.
And like obviously our first relationships are with our caretakers, who whether they're mother, fathers, grandparents, whoever, like those are our first relationships. But then after that, our first love relationship is kind of like the outline for everything after.
Yeah.
So if that is like a traumatic experience, like you're right, like it
It's
kind
gonna
of,
be hard, yeah.
yeah, there's residual there for like everything after, especially because you usually do give yourself so purely in that first relationship.
Yeah.
I just know, like, in listening to your story, like, there's so much that parallels other people's abuser types,
Yeah.
right? Like, a lot of the extracurricular, whether it's drinking, drugging, stuff like that.
Hmm.
The narcissistic aspect of like how it's always your fault even when it's my fault, that kind of stuff, and the brainwashing, the abandonment stuff, and then the run-ins with the law, like all of that stuff is pretty, seems to be pretty streamlined. And I'm
Yeah.
starting to think that like you're either like, this is going to sound terrible, like you're either an abuser or you're a victim of abuse. Like
Yeah.
there's not usually crossover. Like if you're an abuser, you're just always an abuser, and you just like, I'm not saying you can't get help and change, but like that's your
It's
MO.
who you
And
are.
like
Yeah.
if you're a victim, you're often, you're not just going to have one experience with an abuser. And there's that same uh uh like synchronicity between narcissists and empaths, right? People who are highly empathetic do usually attract people who are highly narcissistic.
Uh-huh.
And so there's that, their narcissists prey on people who are highly empathetic.
Yeah,
So
and it's
like
kind
when,
of like spotting that person in the crowd that doesn't feel like she's confident about herself, and they're kind of like, I'm gonna pick you because I know I can make you kind of my bitch, like do whatever
right,
I want. And then it's
right.
also, just I don't know, just picking that one. For me, I always was attracted to someone who I feel like I can fix. And it's like, oh,
Mm,
you just got out of jail. Like, let me help you get your life back together. And
hmm.
it's like, doesn't, they have to help themselves before you help them.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's really important. Help yourselves before you help them. Fill your cup, that whole thing.
Yeah.
You put your mask on before assisting others
Yeah.
on the plane, all
Yeah,
that stuff.
exactly. And it's like
Yeah.
we're told that throughout life, but when it's actually in the moment, it's hard because then you're like, I care about this person, I love him, I
Yeah.
would do anything for you. But it's like if you're not putting yourself first, it's not the right relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think wanting the desire to fix someone I think is really common in these types of dynamics
Yeah.
because I definitely felt that in my relationship and I feel like I've resonated hearing that in other people in their situations. So I
Yeah.
definitely think that's a thing. Um,
Because it's too boring. If you can't fix them, it's boring. If
right?
you want to fix
You need a project apparently.
you need a
Anita needs a
project, then like
project.
it never works. It always fails. But if there's like one little chance that it works, you feel so
Yeah.
like powerful. Like I changed
Yeah.
him. I made him a better person. And to
Yeah.
this day, I still think like, okay, yes, I had a horrible time with my ex, but he's such a great person now, and I could truly say I'm so proud of him. He got sober. He doesn't drink. He's huge and like climbing and has two beautiful little girls now. So I'm like, no matter how hurt and hard that was, I'm so happy his outcome is to this day where he's a good dad and he's able to have a happy family with what it seems like.
Yeah. So hopefully he's reformed maybe and gotten
Yeah.
some serenity. So in on the fix it category, like I before I started going to Al-Anon, and just for people who don't know, Al-Anon is for people who are around alcoholics. So whether it's your parents or your friends or your significant other or your children, like it's a support group 12-step program for people who are affected by the family disease of alcoholism. Also, people go to Al-Anon meetings whose parents aren't alcoholics, but their grandparents maybe were, or it's throughout their family, or their parents or someone close to them might be struggling from mental illness or illicit drug use because it all kind of manifests the same way as chaos in the family circle or family dynamic.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have done so much in my life is trying to fix things and people like, like trying to always like get involved and fix stuff. And it was always from my own need to control. And like, I'm
Yeah.
like, I said alcohol's my, my favorite, thing that I would want to go to. I've been sober for quite a few years, but like, it's really control. Like, let's be real. Like, control's my first drug. Alcohol is maybe my second one.
Yeah. And I feel like once you can control things, you feel at ease.
Yeah.
Like as long as you have control, you feel settled and peace.
Yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing is control's elusive, right? It's like you think it's all like there's no real control. I don't have any real control. I think I do. Well, I do over myself, right? Only with myself. But really tiny bits of myself, like cuz so many things are happening around me and to me and around me that I can't control. Um so as being a mother and a parent,
Hmm.
is there anything that like as you're going through motherhood that you kind of like think back and you're like I want to make sure that my kids don't find their way into these types of scenarios and like is there anything that you're like trying to prep like I know for me I'm trying to really make sure that obviously I model appropriate and loving relationships in my significant other and people in my
Yeah.
family stuff like that but then also like curate like some really good self-confidence
Yeah.
in my kid because I want to make sure
Yeah.
that they don't fall prey to these and like healthy boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Like having empathy, but also like, yeah, no, now you're taking advantage of my empathy. Is there anything that you're like trying to instill in your babies that
I think just the same thing of being confident. I know with my son, we kind of will say, like, I am brave, I am smart, I'm kind. Those things, because I think growing up with my parents, I never felt good enough. And just showing up, I think it's so important. I know with my partner's schedule of being on the road a lot, it's hard. So as long as like I can show up and always be there, no matter if I'm like tired or there's days where I'll like just go upstairs and cry because I'm just like, it's such a fucking hard day.
mm-hmm,
But I can't let my kids see all of that emotion
mm-hmm,
because I have to be there for them and I have to
mm-hmm,
be the one kind of with it together. Like it's okay to
mm-hmm,
see for them to see me kind of down sometimes, but
mm-hmm,
I want to show up for them first. So I think that's super important and not letting, especially our relationship, as long as I want them to be like my relationship, if I looked at my daughter and she was going through that, would I want her to leave or stay? So I just want them to kind of grow up with that mindset too of like, you have the power. It's all for you. Like, you don't let anyone else tell you what to do, or you're not good enough, or you're not pretty enough, or you're not skinny enough. And it's so scary because social media is so huge now, and there's TikTok and there's Instagram, and it's like I had such a hard time growing up not feeling confident that I just don't want my kids to kind of surround themselves with social media and be like, I have to look this way or I have to wear these things to make myself look good in front of everyone. Because that's the hard thing, I think, especially girls. They'll like compare themselves to other girls and what they have and what they wear and who they're dating. And it's like, that's the last thing I want my kids to do. And it's so easy. I think for me, the scariest thing when I was 16, I tried committing suicide. So for me, it's very common. And I don't want my kid to ever feel like they can't tell me that they're sad or they're scared to tell
Mm-hmm.
me, because it's okay to be sad and it's totally normal for high schoolers to get in that hole of depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want my kids to feel comfortable. Like, I still want to be the parent, but I want them to come up and tell me anything, whether if it's like questions about HIV or herpes or sex, like, just I want to be their support system and never judge.
Yeah, I think that's so important, that open line of communication, right? Because I didn't have that with my parents. I did not feel comfortable
Yeah.
going to them with my problems, whether if it was because maybe they didn't, try to kind of pull that out of me in a way that was, whether
Yeah.
they were in their own denial of not wanting to know those things or talk about those things or their own discomfort, or even like that they were too busy being authoritarian or authoritative parents, and like it
Yeah.
wasn't that kind of a shared mutual relationship of communication. I know that like emotions in my family were not really welcomed, minus my dad was allowed to be really angry, but like nobody else was, and like we weren't really allowed to have those kind of moments.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important to have that open line of communication, especially like you said with your daughter, um, like I hear you kind of talk about like the autonomy, like being really pro autonomy, like your body, your boundaries, your things, because I think that also helps as you get older, especially for young women or women in general. Things that we weren't really taught or celebrated were like, when I was growing up, anyways, it was like, my family was very much like, you're not wearing that. Go give this person a hug. Like, do that, like
Yeah.
you
The
didn't,
rules.
yeah, you did not have a lot of autonomy. So of course, like, how does that work? Like, are you all of a sudden supposed to have autonomy at 16 now
Yeah.
when everybody else has dictated it for you? No, like
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. So I love that
And I
you're
relate to that
focusing
a
on that.
much. I remember being in high school, I would wear pajamas to school and then I would undress when I got to school.
Oh yeah, same
I
same deal. Like we
And
all did
I'm
it.
like, so I definitely want that for my kids. Like, if they don't want to give them a hug, who cares? Don't give them a hug. I
Yeah,
don't care. And I,
yeah,
I think my parents too, they were just always working. And I never came to a game, never, it was always work first. And to me, so growing up, it's like, I don't give a fuck about my job. Like, my kids are my job first, and
hmm
then I can
hmm
go work. But I always want to make it seen that I'm there and I'm
yeah,
supporting them. And if they want to be different, if they want to dye their hair, go for it. Like, never
yeah.
question their curiosity.
Yeah, I love that. You and I are on the same page on that. And I love that you brought up social media. I grew up in the 90s, so there was no social
None.
media. So it was great in a way. We had a lot of media, like there was
Yeah.
a lot of like beauty image media and magazines and TV and stuff like that. A lot of very like hardcore messaging on that. But, I only had everybody in my school to compare myself with and supermodels, right? That are obviously supermodels and
Magazines,
actresses,
yeah.
but I didn't have an additional endless supply
Like
of
apps,
people.
yeah.
Yes, that I could just look at and try to compare myself to, or all of the like trends and all the things, and even like these really dark corners of the internet where people are like having like rooting each other on in their eating disorders and weird shit like that. Like I
Yeah.
didn't have access to any of that. That was not around. So it was hard enough for me. I also struggled very much with depression and suicide when I was in my teenage years. I
Yeah.
think also because I didn't feel like I could talk or bring any of that to my parents, similar to you.
And you're
And
so alone. Yeah.
Yeah, I just suffered alone. And luckily, I didn't take my own life, but I had moments where that was really could have happened.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I'm very also afraid of social media with the kids and the things. And in some ways, it's great because there's more awareness to topics and things that that were previously
Yeah.
shrouded in stigma. So I
Mhm.
think there's like much more awareness of abusive relationships and the uh, in like details of it or the uh,
And there's like Instagram pages of like quotes and just like
right
amazing things.
inspirational stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. So there is like stuff like that that I think is beneficial and helpful, but sorting through it, good luck. You're going to get all the other stuff and it's going to
Well,
where
it's
our
all
brains were not meant,
yeah,
yeah,
it's these
to deal with it.
influencers and how they look, and it's like you're never gonna look like them, and that's totally fine. Like you are
And
your own
also, it's
person.
not real. Like
Yeah,
everything else is not real,
exactly.
like
And they have AI now, and I'm like, my next generation, their next generation is so fucked because
so next
it's
level,
just
yeah.
and that's I think we had this conversation with my partner of kind of growing up in a small town. As a little girl, you dream of being famous or falling in love or being in the big city, and I'm like, want my kid to not have that because it's all those Disney shows that just make it seem like you can fall in love easily and have a happy ever after. And I think growing up, when you're surrounding yourself with those shows, that's kind of what you expect. So when something goes south, you're like, okay, well, I'm not good enough. This wasn't, you go into that kind of
Right.
depression.
Right.
And so it's just all these shows that give us false hope. And it's a really like not appealing, and it's kind of I'm not for it because it's should be about like friends and like love and creating your better self. Like go through if you have problems, if you have trauma, I think that's so hot. I think that's so cool. Like you actually have a story, and that's so beautiful that you have all these things and all these just history of things going down the line. And I think that's really important versus worrying about finding your first love and finding your Cinderella and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, like actual real a little bit more of a
Reality.
realist idea and like not giving you these false
Yeah.
realities to kind of like compare yourself to. As is, if that's all that you have to reference, then when things do go south, because they will, because nothing
Yep.
in life
It's
is picture
reality.
perfect like that.
Nothing's gonna
It's
be
like,
a movie.
yeah, you're like shocked. You're like, oh, how is this? This doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. What do I do now? Yeah. So I agree.
And I think that's why I came to LA because I was like, I want to be in the fashion industry. I want to be top notch working bitch. I didn't want kids. I didn't want a husband. I was like, I just want to be my own self and my money. And it's like when you get there, I was like, fuck this. Like, I don't want to work in the industry. I was like, there are mean people in the industry that'll take
Yeah.
advantage of you. And I think being a
Yeah.
woman, it's scary. I mean, you have all this, it's like, I don't want my daughter hoping to be in the industry. I mean, half
Yeah.
of the industry is being taken advantage of. And it's hard. You have to be a really tough cookie to survive the industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
do.
Oh yeah. Business and anything, right? Like business is hardcore.
Yeah.
Like you got if sometimes you have to separate your talent from business or your artistry from business and business is cutthroat. We're it's all about capitalism, man, and don't get me started. But whole other pod. But I have one last question for you,
Yes.
Anita. So I like to say, and I said earlier, I don't give advice, but I do like to give suggestion. And so I want to ask you if you have a suggestion for anyone who might be listening that is suffering right now with
Um,
abuse or, in an abusive situation or just got out or anything.
I think if you are in an abusive relationship, if you are having that gut feeling of why am I doing this, or the back of your head kind of telling you this is wrong, follow that gut because it's always right. Don't make excuses. Just move forward, and it's going to be really hard, but it's so worth it once you're out of it. And if
Yeah.
you're just coming out of it, like get the help. No one can get over something without help. It's
Yeah.
nearly impossible. So,
Yeah.
I love talking to friends. I love talking to other people, but like a true person who's professionalized in it, like such a good key to have, such a
Hmm.
help, and
Yeah.
you can call them at any time. So definitely, definitely all that recommend.
Yeah. I agree with that. Anita,
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. When I asked you for a 2 hour block of time, I was like, I know that
That's what we're
time is very valuable. 2 hours
Oh
is like
no, 2 hours away from
it's
kids.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's 2 hours away from the kids, but it's also like 2 hours that you have so many things you could be getting done in those two
No,
hours.
it's
So
not so good.
thank you so much.
Thank
And,
you.
you
I
know, you and
appreciate
I will
it.
be in touch, but thank
Yeah.
you for doing this.
Thank you. I'm excited. Thank you.